Hi, everyone. Let's wait a few minutes for us to join. John is also missing. Hey, Michael. Hey, Carsten. Hey, Ray. Hi, Hank, and hi, Neil.
Hi, everybody.
Good to hear you, Hank. Hey, Steve.
I can hear you, Johannes, but I did not understand you.
Test. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe the audio is not good. Hey, John.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Hannes.
I was just saying, let's wait a few minutes for people to join.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I guess we should get started, and if others join a little later, then we can accommodate for that. So I sent out a brief agenda. I was suggesting to also discuss the key trans topics. I forwarded them an email, or I forwarded them the meeting invite for our weekly call, and asked them also to join. I don't know if anyone here is actually from the key trans group or participates in the key trans group. Is there? Michael, or
I didn't see you send that out. When did you send that out?
well, I sent it to the key trans list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But maybe they didn't have a chance to join today for whatever reason. Okay. Maybe they join later, and then we can talk about that stuff. The other thing where we stopped last time, last week we had a holiday, so we skipped that meeting. But the week before, we looked at the list of open issues, and we specifically spent some time on one open issue that Antoine created. He was talking about the URL for the transparent statements, I believe, if I remember that correctly. But there are tons of other issues that we need to go through, unfortunately. Or it's good that we captured the open issues. Steve, is that okay for you to go through them? Or do we have other topics that we would like to sort of like, we're in the gender bashing phase for today? Any other suggestion? Or Hank, you are in the queue.
I've got to drop at 20 after, so if that has any input on the schedule.
Sure, it definitely has. Hank,
we do have a large backlog. It'd be nice to triage through them.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. Hank, do you want to say something?
Yeah, exactly. So for respect to the agenda bashing, maybe a small report on what we are doing with Commeter, which is a concise Merkle tree proof ID, and how we are arranging that to be updated significantly for the next iteration.
Okay. I guess maybe if we discuss this after Steve left, I think, is that okay for you, Steve? Because then we could
Yeah,
start.
it's fine. I mean, it's up to you guys. If we feel that'll fill the hour, then that might be more productive.
No. I mean, we start with looking at some of the issues. Maybe we can assign some issues to someone who is most qualified to make some proposal on resolving the issue, or maybe some of the issues are actually stale and we can close them. Okay. Let me.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry. You should have permissions to share the screen. Yeah, it works.
This is Charlie. Sorry, I'm running a little bit late. I got back-to-back meetings here. But one thing that I have brought up in the past is that there is no standing invitation for this meeting, I don't think. Is there? I mean, isn't it a different URL every week?
Yeah. I believe that's true. Because
is there any reason why we can't have the same URL so I can just click on it instead of having to download a new calendar invite and firing that up?
Yeah.
To the upcoming calendar for this, then you will have a calendar entry, and if chairs put the Media Echo link in it, which I think is now automatic, then you will have that in your calendar.
Okay.
That I don't believe that is working for me. I'm using Outlook Web Access as the calendar, and it puts it in my Mac calendar. And I mean, I can go click on that, but it doesn't register in the calendar that I use every day.
You could unicast me, and I could help you, but
okay. Well, why don't I ping you on the email?
The links change because of this technology, and there's not really anything we can do about it.
Okay. I guess that's what I thought the answer would be, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like yesterday's solution in a way. Okay, over. Thank you. Michael, I'll ping you offline. Thanks.
Okay. Steve. Steve, do you want to, like, you are looking at the issues right now. Do you want to say something about them? You're on mute in case you're talking. Steve, you're muted. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
I can
hear you, Hannes.
Okay. Good.
Have we lost Steve?
Did we lose
Can
him?
you guys hear me now?
Yes,
Yep.
there you go.
Now it works.
Okay. Too many buttons to turn things on and off. All right, so we'll spend about 10 minutes going through some of this stuff. I was going to work from the back for some ones that possibly hope that we can close more quickly and triage some of these. So this one was the terminology. I think we've got the majority of it done with this PR. In fact, we made comments of this. So I guess my proposal here is just to close this one at this point because we've converged most of the stuff. Ray had a good doc that we reviewed. I think we've got a good stability point here. Any objections to closing this one out?
What was my sorry? What was my document that you're referring to, because can you go? I guess I can open it up and look, but
Yeah, it was this one. I don't know if my screen. Yeah, there it goes.
oh,
The sky view.
okay,
Basically,
good.
this was the putting a higher level overview over it.
Yeah, it still was helpful to me. I think it can still help us, although it's probably not going to be accurate over time. Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to close this one.
Steve, could we just see the final language just so we're all on the same page and understanding what we've landed on?
Is it in the document section?
Sorry, well,
Is it
I
in
heard
the documents of the SCITT document
it's in the
library? I didn't see it
PR,
there.
right? It's well, that's not going to come through. It is the document.
So I think one of the things that we can just say, if it's pretty sure this is true, we're saying append only log instead of registry or ledger, even though it may be implemented in some other way. Okay, so it was just to use that name as a way to just say that, and then get rid of the other type of nomenclature, and then probably in our definition we can say an append only log might not be an append only log. It may be something else that still has the attributes that we need. Was that one of the main things, Steve, that was done here?
We did use append only log. We did use transparency service as the main pieces to the latest changes. I don't remember if we discussed the details of if you're doing something other than append only log, if it has the same attributes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think transparency service has been a pretty useful thing to say, and helps people kind of understand what it is without anything more. They kind of shake their head and go, okay, I know what it is a little bit. Okay, so that's probably going to help us just to have that that change versus saying SCITT or SCITT registry or something else, because that doesn't do it. But okay, thank you.
Anybody
Is
else?
that written somewhere? Yeah, is that written somewhere where we say explicitly what transparency service is?
I believe there is a definition that's in the definition section. Yes.
Could we see that, Steve, if you have that available?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Let me just do something here. Copy that.
Yeah, Steve, I wonder whether we should put an action item to Ray to double check whether he's actually really fine with of the way how his feedback was addressed, because he spent an awful lot of time producing a document and sort of discussing this issue with us, and so I want to make sure that we actually captured the feedback. Ray, obviously that puts a little bit of burden on you after all this discussion and your write-up and so on, to double check whether you are happy with what we finally ended up with.
Yeah. So transparency services in section 4 in the architecture document.
Here we go.
Right. Service, though I don't see explicitly called out. It's implied, I think, more than anything else. Oh no, I'm sorry. There's a definition. Section 3. Section 3 is the definition.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the transparency service is referred to by its synonym notary. I don't know if that's actually a synonym.
Yeah, I agree.
I think a notary
that as well.
is, and I've been coming across this a lot, and maybe it'll be a good tool for us. Okay, and that is, if you have there can be a signature. Somebody signed something, and then there is a way, and this was all in the NIST. They have a whole thing about how to get the to prove that the person actually has that signature at that time, where you send them a nonce. And there's also, I think that's the way to do it. They also have a time stamping way to do it. But you send them a nonce and you say, sign it. And then I'll check it with your public key and make sure that you actually signed it with your private key. So that's kind of like a wet signature on something, so that you can say, okay, I sent you a nonce and you did it right now and you signed it. So I know you have that signature, that private key. But then there's a secondary thing, which would be that I don't see discussed in places, but I think it's the way they do a lot of the open SSL stuff, where, or I guess that's not the name of it, where you have something that you actually do trust, and then it does that wet signature business and verifies that the person did have that private key at the time, and it signs it, it witnessed that. So it's now another deferral, one more step out from the actual witnessing. So if you had an entity that did a wet signature checking of the the public key and private key connection, that seems like that would be the definition of a notary, and not the transparency service, which is a little bit different than what I think of as a notary. And that's how I think about it now. I'm so I would take out a transparency service, is often referred to by its synonym notary, because in my mind that isn't right. But I don't know if we're trying to edit this now, and I don't want to get distracted from if there's some serious thing we need to accomplish. Thanks.
I mean, I think of when we have this particular issue we're tracking, it was the Registry and Transparency Service. I think this was where we were trying to figure out, and we do have this piece here. I think the notary is a part of it, but not a synonym. I would agree with that. I thought we had a different issue tracking that. Add notarization. I think that, and we have these two here. So we can put it in, I mean, we can leave this one open and revisit here, or we can track it as part of the other issue, because we wind up with this one being a larger, specifically around Registry and Transparency Service. Then we have another one that specifically talks around the notarization process.
Okay, so I don't think they actually normally call it notarization, but I know they called the trusted timestamps could be used with a notary functionality. But I'll tell you what I'll do is I will, because I've been working intently on this lately, so you have my attention on it. Then what I will do is write up what I understand as these little pieces, because I've been trying to just understand the various cryptographic mechanisms, and these are mechanisms that are mentioned in places, but I see that the what is the name of everybody's using now, and because they had trouble with people getting paying for a public key, a certified public key, and so then they went to the cheap free method to do it, and I do it all the time, but I can't think of it for some reason. Anyway, so that is like a deferral, where you have another entity that you trust more, that at one time witnesses the thing, but that public key and private key are now gone. They're no longer there, but you have this thing that says, yeah, I witnessed it at the time. They did have it. And so that, I think, is like the concept of a notary. And is there another, well, does somebody know? Is there a clear definition of what a notary is? Because it certainly is not a transparency service in itself. It's a function that is a cryptographic function, and I think it's this deferral. If somebody watching a wet signature being done, and then saying, I watched it, and I'm a very trusted entity because I have the paid for public key. And so if somebody does, then maybe in the chat you can let me know where it is, and I'll go look at it. But I'm trying to absorb everything about this, because just to let you know, I'm working on a air-gapped protocol, which basically will be requesting for data or delivering data, and then securing it on, flash drive or jump drive or something. And so we're working on this right now. But anyway, thank you.
Okay, so Ray, I'm going to assign this one to you for some next steps. Okay.
So I'll update on that.
Yeah, are you okay with that, Ray?
Yeah, no, I will, but I probably will not. But yeah, I'll do that.
No, you don't need to sort of like,
this is number. This is
No, issue 7.
Okay, issue 7. Thank you.
Okay, I need to drop, so I'll leave it for you guys for the next items.
Yeah. In the meanwhile, a couple of additional folks joined that I was wondering whether someone from the Key Transparency group joined as well. Chris, are you following the Key Transparency discussion?
Vaguely. I did not join on that basis.
Oh, okay.
Ori probably can say more about that.
Hi, Ori. Are you?
Hey, yeah, so I'm following the Key Transparency work. So if you haven't watched the BOF videos, you should. They're really excellent. From the last IETF, they had a lot of really relevant content. And I think the important thing for folks here to understand is when you say key transparency, they mean like key value store transparency. They don't mean like cryptographic key transparency. Now, of course, a key value store could store cryptographic keys, but so can a SCITT transparency service. So I think there is like a tremendous amount of overlap in terms of the mission of the Keytrans charter. But it does seem to be focused a little bit more lower level at just like the securing bytes and sort of representing key values and gaining cryptographic properties that you care about in a system. Whereas we spend a lot of time talking about naming things and architecture diagrams and sort of process pieces. They're focused mostly on securing cryptographic representations of key values that can be applied to many different use cases. At least that's my reading of the current charter. They do have a structure that's sort of similar to our concept of a feed. And I don't believe it's going to be bound to any particular content type. Sort of similar to the way SCITT is also not bound to any particular content type.
So Ori, if you don't mind me asking this question, do you see from your review of this how we can, does the key trans stuff seem to fit into the identity, our needs for identifying or at least getting the public keys of the identities that we're working with, something like that?
So they talk a lot about applying key transparency to username like identifiers like email addresses or phone numbers, where you want a consistent public key for a given phone number, and you want the property that no network adversary can partition the network in some way that would disrupt the end-to-end encryption capabilities of communications networks. Does that answer your question?
Well, I like the answer, and so it's progressing my understanding. So thank you.
John, you're in the queue. Do you want to add something to this discussion?
Yeah, just a short bit. So thanks, Ori, for filling in. Do we have the? Maybe I'll go find them. We should put links to the BOF videos in the hedge docs to make it easy. Yeah, so I got a similar impression. I had a bit of a dialogue on the chartering process, and I think the words they're using look like a huge overlap. And I also think it's kind of confusing. Key transparency and certificate transparency to me are extremely closely related things, but maybe they're further away in these groups than it seems, because indeed, when I questioned the sort of aims or the overlap, the response that I got back was very much focused on a user-centric, personal privacy, anti-stooping, prove these are the, so the reason it's looking at bits of keys is prove these keys are actually the keys that were made over there and not some that were replaced in the middle, which is a very special use case that's kind of adjacent to us. So yeah, it's an interesting one to watch for potential creep overlap, but it doesn't look to me anymore like the initial use cases are actually going to particularly overlap with our use cases. If I've understood that right.
Can you say why you think that's adjacent? These seem to be, to pile on to what Ori was saying, like the exact same problem. It's just like a different thing that's stuck in the log or in the tree at the end of the day. And there's of course like deployment specific considerations that go into what goes in the log with regards to, for example, who owns the thing that goes in the log, who is the public key correspond to, who produced the software artifact, whatever. But like the core of this work, that is like how the log is structured, how proofs are generated, who audits the log, all that stuff is, to my understanding, like highly similar to what's being developed in KT. KT has like some properties on top, like they don't want you to be able to like enumerate the log to like figure out what's in there because there's potentially like privacy sensitive stuff like usernames, but like,
yeah, I think that's the crucial difference. So I would be inclined to agree with you, and the reason we started this thread is that for a great many use cases, the righter answer, just from an efficiency of work point of view, if nothing else, would be to use SCITT and cozy Merkle tree proofs to do all this stuff. The pushback on that opinion in the Google Doc for chartering ultimately came to that non-enumeration, the personal privacy bit. I think they have a repudiability requirement, so you can deny that you have a key if an oppressive person comes at you, but you can prove that you have that key if a friend comes at you. And if they want to solve those use cases, we could expand our scope and our tech to solve those use cases, but I think we're not quite there yet. And the interesting question would be whether they are constrained to that or whether we accidentally get this big overlap that we're talking about. But that's where I'm kind of convinced that there is other work that's worth doing, not to say that they're in many cases very overlapping.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying.
Does that sound right to you, Ori? I mean, it would be a shame to create two almost identical things just for the covert journalist use case, which I think is basically what they're doing. But that is a use case that's valid.
Yeah, I think there is a big difference there from what I've seen, and I did view all those. They were great. It seems like they do have a different problem at hand, at least constraints on it are different in that they have a much higher volume of participants than we're probably looking at here. And those participants are like the entities that are probably submitting to SCITT are less likely to have any problem with identifying, like they probably have a domain name already associated with them, for example. And whereas just people messaging each other or something don't really have that. They might have an email, something less significant. So I think that those constraints are different enough such that if I were making a call myself with no one in the room, I would say that if we try to overlap with what they're doing, then we're going to get ourselves with a lot of features that we don't need, and features that we need that they don't have. So I think that that I would not push for trying to. But I think we should still be very, very cognizant of what they're doing, and what the issues are that they're seeing, making sure that those are dealt with on our side. Thanks.
Any other comment? I hope we manage to get the guys to join our conference call at some point in time in the future to discuss this, rather than sort of use sort of like secondhand information on what they are trying to accomplish, what the similarities and the differences are. I'll keep doing that. Dick.
Thank you, Hannes. Yeah, I think we need to also keep in mind that this is not a greenfield opportunity. There is a fairly large supply chain implementation that's underway that's existed for a few years. Things like signed software products and so on and so forth. So whatever we do here, hopefully it will be synergistic with what's out there already. I think that's going to be important to adoption of SCITT, is that we can accommodate the practices that are already being used, but we're adding some value that people will find useful, like the authenticity and integrity verification components that will help bring that trust to the public, so that they can check this registry or transparency service to see if a piece of software is indeed really trustworthy. Thanks.
Thanks, Dick. Yeah, certainly. Okay. Let's switch sort of back to the agenda, namely, let's give Hank briefly a chance to talk about the Hank, how did you call this? You called this commetry or something like this.
Commeter, yeah, that's
commeter,
the abbreviation. Okay. Exactly, commeter is the abbreviation for concise Merkle tree proofs. There are two types of them, but I'm not going into the details here. So we were, what are we doing here? We were standardizing two tiny fragments. One of them is about the sign statements. It's what the issuer, the supply chain entity, emits as the actual statement about the supply chain. That is the signed statement, and then we use the transparency service to give some additional assurances. That's what the transparent statement then is, and that's basically the signed statement plus the receipt. And the receipt is the other tiny thing that we are standardizing here, and so therefore it is too cozy using envelopes. The signed statement is rather straightforward. I'm not going into details about that. The receipt needs to include information about the trees used. There is not just one tree out there. There are different flavors of hash trees. They are balanced, they are small, they are labeled, there are a lot of, mechanisms and metadata you can add to that. There are consistency proofs and inclusion proofs and such. So what are we doing here? We are going, we're overloading a receipt that is just for SCITT. Then we decided to cut it into halves. We go to the cozy world and make a generic Merkle tree proof document there that already exists. And then wanted to profile that, for example, for SCITT. Trying to do that, we realized now that is a lot of things we overload this document with. Also, we are already initially overloading it with cherry-picked algorithms that might be a little bit too much, and it actually might be contested or somehow under question. And so, so I think we're dialing that back. I think Ori is the lead of this document, and he can add something from his point of view after I'm done with this. So what we did is we decided to use the one algorithm as a hash algorithm for trees that is already known in the IETF, and that is for certificate transparency. That is already in RFC. And so when you want to enumerate algorithms for trees, we just start with the one that is well known in the IETF, make a cozy structure for that. That is basically the basis for all the other things and the receipt. And we're not only doing that. I think it's a good current practice at the moment to start a base document and immediately a profile for it. So you understand literally at looking at the second document how to profile the base document. The base document comes with a well-known algorithm, and the profile document will come with a not so well-known algorithm, but also popular. And I think it's CCF, depending on the author's decision. And so going from there, we now have the agreement, I think, internally how to proceed with this. We are doing a cozy document that is still the concise Merkle tree proofs with just a single algorithm from CT that is well known, establishing the registry, and immediately in parallel having a profiling document for the base document says how to add other algorithms to the registry and how to describe the extensions to the structure that is used in CBOR here. So I think that's the current way forward. It took a while to find our sweet spot here, to be honest, especially with the churn and involved stakeholders, and especially with a lot of inputs here. I think that's the way we want to do it right now, and that's why I'm highlighting this. Again, this is not about the sign statement, it's about the receipt structure. We're doing cozy first, CT first, and a profile for CCF probably in parallel, and therefore we should have a good basis. Open items are registration policies at the time of creation of receipt, because they can alter the believability of receipt in hindsight. So a receipt might need a link back to the registration policy in force at the point of creation of receipt to understand who was allowed to put a signed statement into the service at the time. So that is a thing. And of course, we want to reference statements between services at some point. So we have to reference those. Early feedback from Rust, like we have to identify the service the receipt is created by, is an optional and relatively easy to fix thing that's already included today. Yeah, that's basically my report. And maybe Ori has some additional items for this, but I think that's basically the summary of where we're at. So yeah, a little bit under the cover churn, but I think the solution we came up with is pretty straightforward now.
Thanks. Yeah, Ori was sharing some pointers to the latest version of the document, which I put into the meeting minutes. So in case you guys want to catch up, the profile document I assume is not yet there, right?
Yes, exactly. It's not there yet, unfortunately. I was counting on it a little bit, but unfortunately, as availability always is sparse, we are probably going to do it this week. We agreed on a file name, we agreed on content, and I think we have to move on. The pull request exists on the links that Ori probably shared. I'm checking this right now.
Yeah, there's some examples. I guess, Ori, you are working on a prototype implementation, or is it someone else?
Yeah, I'm working on a prototype implementation, and it follows the latest pull requests on the draft, and it defines a cozy representation of a signed inclusion proof and a cozy representation of a signed consistency proof. And those are the two proof types that RFC 9162 defines, which is RFC 9162 is the certificate transparency RFC, which defines the minimal consistency proof for our binary Merkle tree. So there's good reason to implement that particular algorithm because it's provably the smallest consistency proof for an append-only log. That's it.
So this is something, at least your prototype is something that we could play around with at the hackathon.
Yeah, I think the pull requests have links to the source code behind it, and the demo is up on SCITT.xyz. The demo is a little hard to understand because it uses detached signatures, and so you have to juggle many files. But the demo implements the draft pull requests that are up.
Good. Yeah, that would be an exercise for the hackathon itself. Cool. Yeah, thanks, Hank and Ori on this one. Let us switch back to the open issue list. John, you're sharing. Takes a while to come up.
Mm-hmm.
No, it takes a while because it's not offering me the right Chrome
Yeah, it
tab.
seemed to have failed or broken at least. So we're back at square one, at least from my point of view here.
I think I've overwhelmed it with I have about 100 Chrome tabs open. It's not picking up. Be there in just a second. Okay, let's do this one. Yes, I do. Share Safari window. Is that the right Safari window? If it's not, I'll just change it.
I don't see anything.
Hello? Okay, we'll try it another different way. And for the 5th time, yes, I do want to share my screen. Okay,
Yeah,
how's that?
now it works. Excellent, excellent.
Okay, so just walking down the list. We did triage these a while ago. Do we want to just go down the 117?
We did.
The new one?
Well, we did start with the first one, and then we had a lot of discussion on this one, and I think that was good. The second one, Hank, you apparently have been assigned to do this one. Is that still current, or do we need dedicated section on SCITT requirements for bend-only log?
I am not entirely sure, to be honest. I think that at the moment the text is clear. The question here is that we want to have that in the terminology. It is kind of in line. Ray has his opinion here, but I think I can, if you would like, if there's agreement on this, if there's a yes, give us a proposal, I can do a PR on the definition of a bend-only log. That's pretty concise. I can run it with Ray if he's okay with that, and some other initially, I don't know, early alpha testers for the text, and then we can go from there if you want this. I don't think it's a blocker, so it's not super urgent, but maybe it's useful for anybody who wants to point at these documents and give somebody an understanding what an append-only log term means here.
Okay, and so the action would be on you to come up with a proposed text and send it on the list, and for Ray to,
yes,
to review it, and also for Antoine, who also posted something here.
Yeah, I'm just taking the action item just to get more movement. I think I can do one task per week at least. So that will be one task, and it's not a big one.
Yeah, let me note that into the meeting minutes that you are going to pick this up.
Yeah, that's okay with me. I'll try to cover that in that number 7, I think it was, that I'll work on. Thanks.
Okay, so Hannes, guide me. Are we just going down?
Yeah, I was just trying to write down the action items in the meeting minutes.
Stock, yeah, fine.
Maybe while you're writing this down, shall I include some examples? So, of course, a hash tree is one example. It's pretty obvious. But Ray, should we talk maybe offline about another example? It's definitely not a hash tree or something like that, for your point of view's sake.
If
Well,
we're
the
talking,
example suggestion was
are we
actually
talking about the
from
last thing or what's on the screen now?
last week.
Maybe they take this offline. I'm not trying to stall this. Let's discuss this
Okay.
offline then.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
I think this is Ori's issue.
Yeah, and I think it's very relevant because we want to have registration policies as the sort of main hackathon thing. So
Yeah, it seems like there's maybe a duplicate issue open, issue 63. I think we should close issue 63 after cross-linking it to this.
oh yeah, it's just a smaller version of the same thing.
I'm going to close issue 63 after cross-link. What's the source issue I need to link to?
The 66.
Awesome. Thank you.
So by policy identifiers, maybe we can look at that one and just make sure we understand what it is. Is this effectively names or links, if you will, to stuff in the append-only log, like how we refer back into the log? Is that what this is?
My remembrance of this is that even the configuration changes need to be recorded and generate a receipt onto the append-only log so we know that it's there. The real question was any other receipts generated needs to be able to point at what the registration policy they were acting on at the time. And this is what this discussion was about.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this is
So do we need to
Right.
specify what is there an interoperability issue here? Why do we need to define these identifiers?
Ask the question again, Hannes. Sorry, I coughed.
So for interoperability's sake, it would be nice if two different transparency servers would immediately, by design, understand what to look at and how to resolve it. And so that's I think one of the aspects here. Of course, it would be nice to have a standard way to resolve the policy. And as Ray already,
The SCITT guy.
The SCITT guy. Who's got Roy? Almost a Ray. Was trying to highlight that the cool things about these hash trees are that you can stash your own assertions in your own tree. So the registration policy of the tree can be stashed in the tree, and that will be a specific, well-known feed, for example, inside a tree. And that the pointer back to these policies could be standardized in that way to have a well-known feed, so to speak, that has always to exist in a transparency service that's maintained hash tree. And that is a decision to be made. I think that is an excellent way forward, but I'm not sure if everybody agrees. So that is basically the topic. Do we want to have well-known feeds for certain things? And just to give another example, the trustworthiness of a processing node in a tree could stash its rats things in a tree, basically about trustworthiness, right? So there could be a limited number of feeds that we would support and are mandatory to implement for certain assertions about the tree service itself, the transparency service itself. And one of them is definitely the registration policy. One other thing for future edition could be attestation results from rats, for example. So there's a lot of use for that, and maybe it's a fundamental principle. And I think that's a thing to decide a yes or no on in the working group.
I think Dick wants to respond to that. Dick, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Hannes. Yeah, one thing that's really important from a consumer standpoint is the ability to, verify and validate these identities. And of course, the ability to do that, I think SCITT has a role in part of that, but it's not alone. It's not the only party that's involved. For example, using an X.509 certificate, as a consumer, I want to know two things: is that an authentic entity, an identity, and is it still valid? And that still valid part is important, because these certificates can be invalidated because of many reasons. They can be found to have been used to sign malware, and they can be invalidated. So these are important aspects that I don't think SCITT is going to be able to maintain a constant update on validity. I think that has to come from another party who's monitoring for those valid certificates. Thanks.
Roy.
Yeah, so Dick, the problem becomes the time validity of certificates is a problem. So being able to do that forevermore is impossible with the current X509 capabilities. The whole point of the notarization is to basically say, at the point in time the evidence was received, here's what the state of that identity was. And that is your longer term ability to audit the signature. Yes, you basically need to be able to know the identity of who signed it, but the ability to check it is limited to a very finite window. The statement that it got revoked at some point is why we get into the discussions of endorsements and claims, saying, hey, this has been revoked as a product with a negative endorsement, backfills this whole conversation. I think we need to get out of simply using X509 revocation as the only way to invalidate things. It just doesn't flow. It doesn't work past a finite window of 2 years.
Yeah, no, I understand your concerns with that, Roy, but what's the better alternative?
Well, the better alternative is basically that. You kind of need to know that there's a number of problems with individual signatures. Is you now have to push out a new set of trusted roots from across the world, and I don't think we want 300 more roots being sent around as here's here's trusted CAs and so forth.
Yeah. So on Dick's thing, if I may interpret there, Dick, for you, you first said this is something that we have to work into the existing infrastructure, and for that reason, I think he's right. We have to have some way of bridging to certificates, while understanding obviously the drawbacks that Roy mentioned here. So I think that's a good question. I had my hand up for a while, so I wanted to just jump in here. And the topic I wanted to discuss was, the policy piece. Who decides if there's a policy, right? The way we've kind of architected this thing is that it's supposed to be somewhat administrator independent, even though in reality it's probably going to be trusted third party most of the time implementing it. But who is in charge of, for example, stating you can only use SPDX and one of Ori's examples there?
So I think at a public cloud point of view, the clouds themselves will have a negotiation of what identity providers they're going to support as an infrastructure. If you have a SCITT instance running on your own firewall, then that configuration is completely up to your own IT department. And that becomes a completely different conversation. I don't
totally agree. And I guess, but I do think there is a missing piece here. It's kind of a vacuum on who gets to talk about policy. because otherwise, if it is in fact a, administrator independent architecture, you could end up having policies in there from all kinds of untrusted sources, and then everyone would have to evaluate the policy for its trustworthiness independently. So,
which is why we were asking for a way to be able to reference the policy so we can at least audit the policy and understand. But you're 100%
right.
correct.
Yeah. Start pulling at the thread, and things get to be a pretty complicated weave.
The trick here to understand is if we do it, whatever way we pick here, either it's by the receipt of the policy, we're pushing that as a requirement for anything on top that has to support search. Right. So there is some ripple effect of how we encode this, putting on the outer system as to what basic search requirements we kind of need.
Is there a need for an instantiation rule setting preparation to build a SCITT? I don't think that's been called out anywhere in architecture.
You want to repeat that? Sorry,
I just wasn't really clear, I guess. But obviously, this thing has to be set up by someone in some configuration, and we don't really talk about that very much, if at all, in the architecture document. And we might want
agreed. Yeah. This is why this was brought up. This is the registration policy has to be an integral part of this. If we're pulling receipts at a good clip, how do you know when policy has been changed on the SCITT instance you're pulling from? And
there's probably other things too. So there might be like an architecture initiation step you have to go through when you're starting a SCITT. And then I think in that section, we should probably state what the various parameters are that you need to decide on before you set this up. Because I don't think this is the only one. There's a few others as well.
I wonder. I think the issue lacks a little bit of clarity on what we are trying to do with which document. Like the last point I just heard from you, Roy, was about an indication of when the registration policy has changed, and obviously an identifier for that policy would be helpful to do so. But that's not what this the text on the screen says. So I don't know. Maybe it needs some more text to clarify what needs
Chat
to
seems
be done.
orthogonal to that conversation, I guess. I have no problem with either way of going about it, but we should probably settle on one. Is policy in or out for SCITT? I guess that's the main question.
Well, maybe this is a version 2 issue, and we try to get some other things done first, and then we tackle this one. I don't know.
May I interrupt? Is this a thing?
Yeah, we actually have 2 more minutes left, so it's a little tight.
Okay, just really quick. So my personal point of view is that we need to provide the, in data formats speak, we need to provide the place for the valuer to put the pointer to policy to. Yes, I think that's pretty mandatory. If there's other opinions about this, please say so on the list or here. I think that's highly important because you have to detect if that pointer changes. That could be a byte compute, right? So you can just have like for ages the same pointer and suddenly it changes. Then you have to understand what's pointing to now, right? So this indication of change of policy that might impact your trust in the service is highly important to consumers of the receipt. And that is why it should be indicated already in the receipt, I think. And how to deal with it, that is a more complicated question, right? Is there a standard way to resolve it? Do we agree standard ways to represent it? I don't know. But I think the place has to be there. I think that's the.
Seems like a fundamental disagreement here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we are not at the end with this issue, and but we ran out of time. I think we need to do a little bit of preparation to make progress on this one. I think Sean and I would have to reach out to some of you to get this moving forward off list, and then to have prepared a discussion for next week.
Say that again. Is that did you give that one to me?
Then John and I will reach out to like several people participated to check with all of you to actually prepare a little bit more structure on this issue for next week's discussion to make some progress on this.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take a look
Yeah,
at it
well,
for sure. Thanks.
There's a bunch of connected issues around registration policy. I think we should bundle them up and make them the agenda for next week, rather than knocking off a little slice at a time.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
Alrighty, done.
Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good discussion, guys.
Upload them. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.